C'est qui en direct?
Nous.
Okay. Bon, on dit top, hein, enfin on mettra en marche le direct dans quelques instants. Tout le monde est... Est-ce que là c'est bon pour le son?
Décalez-vous un petit peu.
Voilà, c'est bon. On voit derrière. Alors, le roi est, en un mot avec un Y, Antoine, procureur de la République adjoint à Toulouse. Merci beaucoup. Voilà, et du coup, j'en profite pour présenter Léa Chambonnière. Alors, on va épeler peut-être aussi. C-H-A-M-B-O-2-N-I-E-R-E, Léa, de son prénom, qui est donc chef d'escadron et commandant la compagnie de Villefranche-de-Lauragais. Et à ma gauche, Frédéric Vergne, V-E-R-G-N-E-S, maréchal des logis, chef à la brigade des recherches de Villefranche-de-Lauragais. Voilà, c'est bon pour vous. Alors ce que je vous propose, on fait comme d'habitude, je fais une synthèse et ensuite on répondra moi-même et les gendarmes aux questions que vous seriez amenés à nous poser. Voilà, donc tout le monde connaît l'identité du jeune dont on va parler maintenant, hein, Batty, B-A-2-T-Y, Alex, qui est né à Oldham, O-L-D-H-A-M, en Grande-Bretagne, le 13 février 2006. Il a donc, à l'heure où on parle, 17 ans et demi. C'est donc un jeune qui s'est présenté. J'expliquerai le contexte dans lequel il est arrivé sur notre sol.
The context in which he arrived here in Toulouse on our soil.
Mais auparavant, je voudrais quand même un peu
But first, I would like to describe what happened since the police authorities of Great Britain began searching for him. And I will then answer your questions about him, as he's been on our soil. He's been with us for 2 days. He is a young man who was born in 2006. His parents were legal professionals in Great Britain. When he was 2 years old, his father left the home and he was mainly raised by his mother. And this is important, by his maternal grandmother.
8 ans. Je dis tout ça à partir de son
In
récit
2014, when he was approximately 8 years old. Now, this is what he said.
Lorsqu'il avait 8 ans,
This is what he said to the gendarmerie of Villefranche.
il a été amené
when he was approximately 8 years old in 2014, he was taken on holiday twice in Morocco, once for 1 month and once for 4 months. This is what he said. Now I will talk to you about the conditions in which he lived along with his mother and maternal grandfather throughout all of these years. So he's had 2 stays rather than holidays in Morocco. Then he returned to Great Britain, where he lived with his grandmother for 2 years, his mother having stayed in Morocco. There was a conflict between little Alex's mother, between her and her own mother, so Alex's maternal grandmother, because his maternal grandmother asked the legal authorities in Britain to have guardianship of this child, given that the mother was rather unstable. Once she obtained guardianship, the mother understood that she could no longer see her son, and then asked her own mother, the grandmother, whether she could spend 2 weeks in Spain over the summer in 2017. The grandmother who had guardianship over Alex accepted, and so this young man left with his mother and his grandfather to spend 2 weeks in summer 2018. He was about 10 years old at the time, so they went to Spain. At this time, the mother then spent 2 weeks in Spain, and then she went back to Morocco, and it was then that the British legal authorities deemed that
que les
He
autorités
was
de
being
police et de
searched
justice
for, and from the
anglaises
10th of
ont
August
estimé qu'un navire
2017,
de
the
recherche
police
pouvait
authorities
être
and the
lancé
British
à
legal
l'égard de la
authorities
mère qui avait donc
sent out a
récupéré,
search
était
warrant
parti avec son
for
fils
the
contre
mother
la décision de justice anglaise qui confiait
who
l'enfant
had left
à
with her
la grand-mère.
son
Il a passé
against
un peu plus de
the
2 années au
legal
Maroc, dans des conditions que
provisions
je
who
décrivais tout
had
à l'heure.
conferred his
Puis,
guardianship to the
au cours de
grandmother. He
l'année
spent
2020,
approximately
entre
2 years
2020
in
et
Morocco in conditions
2021,
that I will
il
stipulate
a à peu
later.
près 15
Then
ans,
in the year 2020, between
il quitte le
2020
Maroc
and
après un petit séjour
2021,
de
when he
15
was
jours en
approximately
Espagne
15 years
pour
old,
venir
he left
dans les
Morocco
Pyrénées
having
françaises.
spent
Quand je dis
about
dans les
2
Pyrénées,
weeks in
ce
Spain
garçon est dans
to then go to
l'incapacité
the
de
French
donner des mots
Pyrenees. Now, when I
précis, mais
say the
quand on
Pyrenees, this
reconstitue un peu
boy
son
is
parcours, il
unable
apparaît
to give any
que
precise
il est
location,
passé
but
par
when
les Pyrénées
you
orientales,
think of
Perpignan, qu'il est allé
his
également dans
journey,
l'Aude.
he would
Ça,
have gone
c'est
through the
départements
Western
limitrophes, ainsi
Pyrenees
qu'en Ariège.
via
Donc,
Perpignan,
il a
through
passé
Aude,
un peu plus de 2 années
and
dans
Ariège.
ces départements-là, sans
He
attache fixe.
spent
Donc,
approximately
il ne restait
2
pas
years
très
in
longtemps dans
these
les endroits dans lesquels il
departments
était.
without any
Dans
fixed
lesquels il était.
domicile, so he never
Lorsque sa
stayed for
mère
very long
a
in
indiqué
these
qu'elle
places.
envisageait de partir avec lui
When
en
his
Finlande,
mother
ce jeune
indicated
a
that she was
compris
going
qu'il
to
fallait que
leave
ce
with
périple
him to
s'arrête
Finland,
et il a
this
décidé
young
de
man
quitter l'endroit où il
understood
était
that this
avec sa
had
mère,
to
a
stop.
marché
So
pendant
he then decided
4
to leave
jours
the
et
place where
4
he was
nuits. En
with his
réalité,
mother, and he
il
went
marchait
walking
exclusivement
for
la
4
nuit et
days
dormait le
and 4
jour entre
nights.
l'endroit où il était a
He
priori dans
was
les Pyrénées
actually
orientales
exclusively walking at night
jusqu'à
and
l'endroit
sleeping in
où
the
il a été
day where
récupéré
he was in the
par un
Western
jeune étudiant dans
Pyrenees,
les
right
conditions
up
que je
until the
préciserai.
place where he was
Il a
recovered
donc
by a
été,
young
il a donc
student.
marché, se
I will say more about
nourrissant
this later.
de diverses choses qu'il pouvait trouver dans les champs
He
ou dans
therefore
les jardins.
walked and he
Et
got
donc,
food from
il a
whatever he
été
found in the
récupéré aux
fields
alentours
and
de
the
3 heures du
gardens.
matin, mercredi,
And
par un
he was
jeune
then found at
homme
about
de
3
26
o'clock
ans,
in the
un
morning
jeune
on
étudiant
Wednesday
qui était en
by a
voiture
young
et qui prenait
man
l'argent,
of
fait des
26 years
livraisons
of
dans les
age, a young
pharmacies, et à 3 heures du
student
matin,
who
a
was
vu ce
traveling
jeune
by
qui
car
marchait le long de la route.
and
Il
was
l'a
a pharmacy
fait monter
delivery
dans sa
driver
voiture.
to make
Le
money. So he
jeune,
was there at
qui
3 o'clock in the morning and saw this young man walking alongside the road. He
lui a
got
parlé
him to
en
come into
anglais,
his
c'était
car,
lui
and
en
this young
qui
person, by the way, he
anglais,
doesn't speak French
lui a expliqué
at
qui il
all,
était, qu'il était
spoke to
recherché,
him
qu'il
in
voulait
English. This
être
student
protégé.
understood English, and he
Et
explained
donc,
that he
à
was
partir de ce
being
moment-là,
searched
le
for,
conducteur
that
de la
he
voiture
wanted
a d'ailleurs
protection.
assez
At this
gentiment
point, the car
gardé le
driver,
petit Alex, enfin, le jeune
who by
Alex
the way quite
adolescent avec lui. Il a terminé sa
kindly
tournée des pharmacies pour
kept
livrer des
young Alex
pharmacies,
with
des
him. He
médicaments.
finished
Et
his
ensuite, il
delivery drive
a
for the
appelé le 17.
pharmacy,
Les gendarmes lui ont donné
and he
rendez-vous
then called
dans
the number
la commune de Saint-Félix
17. The
commune dans
gendarme
laquelle les services
asked him
de
to
la
meet in the
compagnie
commune of
de gendarmerie de
Saint-Félix-Lauragais, a
Villefranche-de-Lauragais
commune
ont
where
récupéré le jeune et le
the
jeune
services of
a donc
the
été
police of
ensuite
Villefranche-de-Lauragais,
transporté
they
directement à la brigade des
took
recherches,
over
puisque
the
le
young
parquet
man.
avisé
He
dans
was
la
then
nuit a évidemment
transported
estimé que,
directly
compte
to
tenu
the
de l'importance de cette
research
affaire,
brigade.
il convenait que ce soit une unité de recherche
It was nighttime, and it was deemed that given the
qui
importance of the
travaille sur
affair,
cette situation.
a search
Pour résumer
unit
les
needed to
conditions de
work
vie
on the
pendant toutes
case.
ces années de ce jeune, on peut dire que
To
il a vécu
sum
avec sa
up
mère
the living conditions of
et
this
son
young man
grand-père
throughout
maternel.
these years, he was living
Il
with
ne
his
décrit
mother
strictement
and his
aucune
maternal
violence
grandfather.
physique. Je ne parle pas de violence psychique, mais
He
il ne décrit pas de
doesn't
violence
describe any kind of
physique de la part
physical
de quiconque,
violence
ni de
without
sa
talking
mère.
about emotional
Il décrit,
violence, but he
sans
doesn't
qu'on
describe
puisse
any kind of physical violence, neither
évoquer le terme de
perpetrated
secte,
by his mother.
lui-même emploie le terme de communauté
We
spirituelle.
can't
Il
use the
s'avère que
term
pendant toutes ces années,
sect as
ce jeune
such, but he
adolescent,
talks
ce
of a
jeune enfant puis
spiritual
adolescent,
community. So that is to
a
say that for
vécu
all these
en
years, this
transportant, alors
young
faudra qu'on en
child
sache un peu
then
plus, mais
turned
il y avait une sorte
adolescent
de phobie de la mère
lived,
avec
and we'll need to get more
sur
information
les panneaux
here,
solaires, donc il
but
se
the
transportait
mother
de
experienced a
maison
sort of
en maison avec des
phobia
panneaux solaires,
about solar panels,
décidant
and
de
so
ne
they were
voyager
traveling
qu'en
from house to
covoiturage,
house with
pas
solar
avec leur propre
panels,
véhicule,
and they only
toujours dans des
used
endroits où se trouvent des grandes maisons,
car
où se
sharing
trouvaient
travel
plusieurs
means.
familles,
They didn't have their
toujours à
own
peu près 10
vehicle,
personnes,
always where there were
qui
large
entraient, qui sortaient, qui n'étaient
houses, where
jamais
there
les
were
mêmes.
several
Ce que je
families,
décris
around
là, c'est
10
ce qui s'est passé
people
aussi
who
bien
were
au
coming and
Maroc
going, never the
qu'en
same
Espagne, qu'en
people. Now,
France.
again, what
C'était à
I'm
chaque fois
describing is what happened both in Morocco, in Spain, and in
de vivre.
France. It was always
Se nourrissant
the
grâce à des
same
potagers,
way of living.
Évoquant le
They
travail
got
sur l'ego,
food
alors là, sur
based
l'ego,
on
apostrophe et géo,
allotments.
un travail sur la méditation,
and there was work on the ego, there was meditation work.
Tout en précisant bien, le jeune
there was no connection with
il n'a jamais été enfermé,
real world. They believed in reincarnation, and the young man specified, yes, he was never trapped, but he always had to live in these conditions. He didn't speak French, and he just indicated in terms of any kind of legal breach that might have happened to him. The British authorities will work further on this. And as a young person, he said there might have been sexual abuse, but when he was small, so not during this time period that I'm referring to. This young man was described by the police who've seen him as well as by the doctor who examined him as tired, yes, but overall in good health. He's said to be intelligent, even though he's never been to school throughout this entire period. He tried to be in contact with his grandmother. We didn't really know whether she was present at the time. This grandmother currently is disabled. She doesn't have a lot of money, so she's not going to come and fetch him herself.
Soit effectivement partie en Finlande, comme elle l'avait projeté de le faire, ce qui avait inquiété son fils, c'est pour ça qu'il avait décidé donc de fuir la communauté dans laquelle il vivait, notamment dans les Pyrénées-Orientales. Le grand-père, qui a toujours fait le périple avec sa fille et son petit-fils, serait décédé il y a 6 mois à peu près, dans des conditions qu'on ne connaît pas encore, mais le jeune a assisté à une cérémonie de méditation autour
do not precisely know why. The young man took part in a meditation ceremony upon the occasion of the death of his grandfather. So we can believe that he is dead.
Identifié comme étant bien Alex Batty.
Since this young man was identified as in fact being Alex Batty, he was identified by a simple comparison of the pictures on these search publications that were distributed internationally and the pictures that the police had with them. So it was immediately apparent that it was him. He was put into contact with the grandmother based from where he was placed last night. Now I would like to finish by saying that the gendarmes of the Villefranche-de-Lauragais unit have done a remarkable job. They've taken care of this young man, they've understood what happened to him, they've spoken to him, they've made connections to understand what might have happened the last few months. This case has paved the way to an international police collaboration and even international political collaboration. As just a few minutes ago, I was speaking with a British minister, an ambassador to the UK posted in France. We've spoken together to see how we can return this young man to his British family, probably tomorrow, in conditions that are not really necessary to describe. He will be returned to his family, at least his maternal grandmother, either tomorrow or the day after at latest. This is what we can say. First and foremost, now I will answer your questions, as will the gendarmes who took part in the investigation. They can provide you some more information following what I've just said.
Alors, c'est une bonne question, puisqu'effectivement, je ne l'ai pas précisé. À l'heure où on parle, il n'y a pas d'enquête policière au Maroc.
Currently, there is no police investigation in Morocco for this case. There's no inquiry either in Morocco or in Spain or in France. The only open investigation is taking place in Great Britain, and I was asked to tell you, especially if there are British journalists here, I believe that's the case, that the only people who can communicate on the British case are the policemen from the Manchester police office. So that's the only investigation that is ongoing. There will not be any in France, at least not on this topic immediately.
on va faire des investigations
once
sur les
we've had a
lieux où
little
il a
bit
pu
more
séjourner
time
dans
and
ce
the
contexte
boy is
quand
back
même qui
in
ressemble
the
beaucoup
UK,
à un
we will
contexte
inquire into
sectaire
the places where
dans
this
les
young
3
man
départements
might
dont
have been,
je vous ai parlé.
given that this is in a context that very much
Voilà,
seems like a
on
sect.
va creuser un peu pour essayer, dès qu'on en saura un
Yes,
peu plus, parce que ce jeune ne
we
sait
will
pas
dig a
exactement où il
little
était. C'est ça qui est
deeper,
d'ailleurs
and
très
as
étonnant.
soon as we
Mais
hear
on
more,
va
because this young
évidemment
person
essayer
did not know exactly where
d'investiguer
he
sur
was,
comment
which is
se
maybe
fait-il
astonishing.
que
We will try and
un
investigate
mineur puisse séjourner
further
dans des
as
endroits
to
en France comme ça,
how
en dehors de tout,
a minor
tout
might
radar,
have
de
stayed in
tout système
France in
éducatif
this
et
manner,
de protection.
away from any kind of radar or any kind of protection.
Alors, la grand-mère n'est pas en capacité, parce qu'elle est un peu fragile,
So the
de
grandmother
se déplacer
is
à Toulouse,
not
donc
able
non,
to travel to Toulouse. She's
c'est les
rather
autorités
fragile.
anglaises
So
qui sont en train de s'organiser, hein, qui ont pris
The
le
British
levier et qui vont s'organiser
authorities
pour que
are
le jeune
currently
parte
organizing
de Toulouse ou
themselves
de Bordeaux, parce que comme vous
and
le savez, le consulat
organising the
d'Angleterre
travel. They
pour le
will see
sud,
whether
l'ouest
he can
de la
leave from
France,
Toulouse
c'est
or from
Bordeaux.
Bordeaux,
Donc
because
on a
the
été
British
énormément en relation avec le
consulate, which is
consulat,
in
les
southwest of
autorités
France,
consulaires
is located in
anglaises à
Bordeaux.
Bordeaux. Mais non,
So
il
we've had a
partira
lot of
directement,
contact
accompagné
with the
par
consulate
des
there.
personnes, mais
He
il sera
will
enlevé à sa
leave
famille qui ne se
directly
déplacera pas en France.
accompanied by some persons, but his family will not be coming to France.
Alors, on va y arriver avec vous. L'autorité judiciaire anglaise est seule habilitée à communiquer là-dessus, mais
The British
en
legal
l'état, il
authorities
n'y
are
a
the
pas,
only
la
ones
France
who are
n'a
able
pas
to
été
communicate on
destinataire d'un
this
mandat d'arrêt
matter,
européen.
but
Voilà.
France does not have a European arrest warrant.
Vous n'avez pas plus d'informations sur leur nom, leurs pratiques, s'il y a des rituels, des choses comme ça?
Alors, pour l'instant, encore une fois, tout part du récit du jeune. Qui,
At this time, once again, this is based on what the young man has
il est quand même en
said,
situation de fragilité, donc les gendarmes n'ont pas passé des heures à
and he
auditionner,
is
donc
in a
nous n'en
somewhat
saurons
fragile
pas plus,
situation, so
mais
the
nous en saurons
gendarmes did not
plus
spend
très vite,
hours
notamment de ses parts à
questioning
lui,
him, so we don't know
quand
much
il
more, but we
peut-être
will
commencera
know
à
more
parler
very
aussi,
quickly,
dans sa
especially
famille, dans
from
sa famille.
him, maybe
Et à
once
ce
he
moment-là,
starts
oui,
to
des investigations sont
talk
faites. Mais pour
more,
l'instant,
once he's returned
on n'en
to
sait
his
pas tellement
family,
plus
and at
que
that
vous
point, yes,
Est-ce qu'il y a des sectes, des
investigations will
communautés
begin, but for now we
spirituelles qui
do
sont
not have much
identifiées
more information than what we've just
Non.
said.
On n'a pas de secte
No.
ou de mouvement sectaire identifié comme tel. Ça aurait pu tout à fait être le cas, évidemment, on y a
We
pensé.
have no
mais
sect
on
or
n'a
sect
pas de
or
secte
movement that has
identifié
been
comme tel qui aurait pu
identified
le
as a
recevoir.
sect. Of course,
On est sur
as a
quelque
sect,
chose
of course, we've
une grosse mobilité.
thought about it that might have
des endroits où
posted
des
them.
familles se retrouvaient, mais
There's a
pas de
lot of
secte en
mobility,
l'état,
and
pas
there
de
are
secte,
areas where families would meet, but
nommément désignée.
there is no sect as such in operation.
Qu'il travaillait ou qu'il faisait de la construction, quelque chose comme ça. Tout à l'heure, vous avez évoqué une histoire de panneau solaire, je ne veux pas avoir très bien compris.
Non, nous non plus. Voilà. Simplement, ce jeune a beaucoup
No,
insisté
we
sur le
don't
fait
know.
que, à l'évidence,
This young
sa mère
man
et son
talked
grand-père
a
maternel
lot about
avaient
how
une
apparently
forme
his
d'obsession
mother
sur
and
l'énergie,
paternal
les panneaux solaires.
grandfather had a
Alors, oui, non, mais
somehow
on
obsessed
va
about
pas
energy
forcément
and
faire
solar
du
panels.
psychologique. Non, mais
We're not
manifestement,
necessarily going to
l'hypothèse
start
du panneau
delving
solaire
into
avec lesquels il se
psychological factors
transportait,
here, but it seems that there's this hypothesis regarding solar panels which they've traveled with. It's a nomadic life, and the only things that they would take with them were the solar panels and their allotment, and then they would find small jobs,
oui, c'est pas une phobie,
and they
effectivement.
would go off and do
Vous faites
everything
bien
else, but they
préciser,
would
oui.
always have
Oui, une sorte
their
de-
solar
oui,
panels and their vegetable
une
garden. So it's not a phobia, no,
raison de préciser.
indeed.
Par rapport à ce que vous disiez, il est possible que des habitants aient eu affaire à
You are
eux,
right,
qu'ils
it
aient
wasn't a
travaillé
phobia.
pour eux, qu'ils aient eu des échanges. Ce qui pourrait aider votre enquête, du coup.
Tout à fait.
Monsieur le procureur, est-ce que vous diriez que ce jeune homme
Naturally.
a un niveau scolaire qui correspond à un jeune homme de 17 ans ou à quelques lacunes du retard?
C'est compliqué de savoir quel est son niveau scolaire, d'autant qu'il ne parle pas français.
It
En revanche,
is
ce qui est certain,
complicated
c'est
to
que
understand
son
what his school
intelligence
level is,
semble
given that he
très
doesn't
vive,
speak
c'est un
French.
jeune
However, what we
très
do
calme,
know is
qui,
that
comme ça,
he seems to
première
be
vue,
very
semble être
intelligent, he
jeune,
seems
normal.
calm,
Après,
and at
quand
first
vous avez
glance
passé toutes
seems
ces
to
années dans
be
ce
a
contexte, il y a sans
normal
doute évidemment des perturbations
person.
psychologiques sur
Now,
lesquelles
after you've
les
spent
Anglais
all of these
travailleront,
years
mais,
in living
en
that
l'état,
way, I'm sure there are
il ne parle
psychological
pas,
consequences
tel qu'il
that
avait,
the British people will
auditionné, il apparaît que c'était
handle,
un jeune adolescent assez normal.
but it didn't seem
Auditionné avec un interprète. Hein,
as he seemed to be a rather normal young teen. we had a hearing with an interpreter.
Ça fait quand même un moment qu'il circule, y compris pas seulement en France, au Maroc, en Espagne, etc. Vous en savez plus sur les autres membres de la famille? Est-ce que c'est exclusivement des Britanniques? Est-ce que c'est international?
Alors, c'est une bonne question. Sur la famille, il s'agit exclusivement de Britanniques. En revanche,
This is a good question you asked about the family. They
are les familles qui étaient avec eux,
completely British.
Il y avait effectivement,
but the families who were with them, because there were always around 10 people, it's important to specify there were families who were from Canada,
et donc, effectivement,
from India, of Canadian origin, of Indian origin, of Spanish origin. And so at different phases, there were communities of different nationalities.
C'est une question qui a déjà été évoquée plusieurs fois. Donc sa famille, il a sa grand-mère qui est.
This is a question that was already asked several times. So in his family, he has his grandmother in the UK.
Les investigations sur la famille, c'est donc une affaire britannique sur laquelle il est assez souvent.
In terms of investigations into the family, this is a British case.
Alors, c'est une bonne question. Pour l'instant, il n'y a que des bonnes questions. C'est une bonne question parce qu'effectivement, si on prend l'exemple de 2 à 3 ans qu'ils ont passé au Maroc, effectivement, ils ont été, même au Maroc, itinérants, même s'ils parlent souvent de montagne.
Even in Morocco, they were moving around. There was talk of mountains, so we can imagine if there was a region in Morocco. But yes, they were moving around. They might stay several weeks or several months in the same place. But yes, it was a nomadic lifestyle. You couldn't really say that they spent 2.5 years in the same place, in the same town in Morocco. That was not the case.
C'est le fait qu'elle lui parle de la Finlande.
Tout à fait.
Pourquoi il n'avait pas envie d'aller en Finlande alors pendant 6 ans il les a suivis
Probablement que, bon, là, je ne sais pas s'il localisait la Finlande, c'était effectivement pas ici. Et compte tenu de son âge, on peut penser que
Finland was, or that it wasn't the same as him. Given his age, you can imagine that at 17 and a half, he might have understood that his life could have been different than what it had been for the last few years. It's a hypothesis, but that's more based on common sense. We don't actually know. It's difficult to know why he then decided to stop living in this way. Nobody knows how she left Finland. We're trying to locate her in Finland. She's supposedly in Finland, but again, the British can tell you more on this matter. No.
Alors, quand il a décidé de partir, c'est encore une bonne question. Effectivement, il a indiqué qu'il connaissait la ville de Toulouse.
Indeed, he did indicate that he knew the town of Toulouse.
Et donc, il a marché en s'orientant plutôt en direction de Toulouse.
So he walked more in the direction of Toulouse.
Il a marché notamment le long de la nationale 7.
Of course, there are signs sort of everywhere, and he walked along the National Road 7, so to specify.
26 ans qu'il a récupéré.
Now, the young student of age 26 who took him in his car found him somewhere between Camon and La Garde.
Est-ce que sur son chemin, il
in
a
Ariège.
croisé du monde en fait, pendant les 4 jours là, on imagine, parce que l'étudiant livreur nous disait qu'il avait de l'argent sur lui. Donc
oui, il avait 100 euros sur lui. Lui, le jeune, indique qu'il faisait
he had 100 euros on him, and the young man said he was trying to reach Toulouse. On the contrary, he wanted to get to Toulouse without meeting many people. That's why he was traveling at night and resting by day. So of course, he did go through towns, villages. Now, if he'd wanted to, I don't know why, only he can say, but he wanted to walk without being seen until he got to Toulouse. We do not know.
Il a simplement montré qu'il n'était pas tout à fait d'accord.
He didn't say if he'd warned his mother before leaving. He just said that he didn't want to go to Finland. We don't know more about this.
Oui, en fait, ce qu'il nous explique, c'est que lui ne souhaitait pas continuer.
He has explained that he did not want to continue living this life. He did not want to go to Finland or elsewhere. He wanted to go back to his life in the UK, and he thought that in a large town such as Toulouse, he'd find authorities who would help him to find his grandmother in the UK.
Je sens que ça va pas être la meilleure question.
I'm sure this won't be the best question.
Est-ce que ce jeune homme a été en mesure de vous indiquer s'il y avait d'autres jeunes dans le même cas de figure que lui?
Il ne s'est pas tellement exprimé sur les personnes qui se trouvaient avec lui.
He hasn't spoken too much about those who were with him beyond the main information we've already given you.
Des réseaux sociaux, des smartphones, etc., ça n'a pas l'air d'être des amiches.
Il n'avait pas de portable au moment où il n'avait pas de portable.
He did not have a mobile. Now one might imagine that this is part of the philosophy of people such as his mother, who seem to be more inclined to avoid those things. But he didn't have a mobile device. It didn't seem that he had one when he was with us.
Bien sûr, bien sûr.
Il existe un réseau virtuel qui relierait
à l'évidence,
YouTube
il n'est
videos
pas
were sent.
certain qu'il
There are
ait
virtual
bien réalisé
networks.
qu'il était
It would
recherché
seem
comme il l'était.
that he hadn't quite understood that he was being searched for as he was.
Alors, quoi qu'au niveau britannique, je ne sais pas. Ce qu'on est en train, effectivement, de rechercher.
On the British level, I don't know, but what we are currently finding out, first we were looking at protecting this young man, but as I said before, we will try and put together the trajectory of this young man in France. Because could gendarmes have been informed of this, and what would have been done had that been the case, if the young man had been found? It's not certain. This will be investigated. We could investigate to see whether we could have done better at a certain time, but I'm not sure whether we will see any kind of dysfunction. Of course, this will be investigated, but for now, we are still in the heat of the moment.
Il a évoqué, lui, l'âge de 5 ans, je crois, 5 ou 6 ans. Mais il a précisé que ça n'était pas pendant son périple, que c'était quand il était encore en Angleterre.
It wasn't when he was out and about, but rather when he was still in the UK, and he specified that it was within his family without saying any more. So that will also be investigated by the British police.
Heureusement, il n'y a pas eu de questions en anglais, car je n'aurais pas été en capacité de répondre très clairement.
Of course, there aren't any questions in English because I wouldn't have been able to have answered them.
Alors, les médias anglais suivent effectivement énormément cette affaire.
The British media are following this case very closely. The Minister Cameron, Minister for Foreign Affairs, has spoken to the journalists in the country and asked them to respect the family privacy of the young man. Of course, he's not currently in a frame of mind to wish to communicate and not hiding anything, but as long as he is in France, we will shield him from media pressure. Then the British will do what they need to do, but whilst he is in France, it is our duty to guarantee his protection as well as his privacy.
Nous, l'affaire continue. On va essayer de comprendre ce qui a pu se passer entre le moment où...
The case does continue for us. We will try and understand what might have happened from the time when, because he was in France, it would seem, in these 3 departments for at least, over a period of at least 2 years. So we will try and understand what happened. We will carry out investigations to understand whether we can repiece his itinerary. This will be done by the police or the gendarmerie, but for now it's really just the beginning of the case.
Eh bien, merci à vous d'être venus jusqu'à Toulouse, pour ceux qui n'y étaient pas.
Thank you in any case for having come to Toulouse, for those who weren't here already.
Et bon retour.
Thank you very
Le
much.
direct n'a
And
pas duré tout ce temps-là, quand même. Et ça intéresse aussi
wishing you a
les
good
médias
return journey.
français.
Have you been live? Have we been live this whole time? Because this is interesting to French media as well. I hope.
Bien, en
we're
tout
still
cas,
live.
merci à vous pour votre... Et après, si je sais qu'il y a
In
toujours
any case, thank
le
you
schéma
all.
télé, c'est une chose.
I know
Si
that
la presse écrite, par exemple, souhaite
TV is one
qu'on continue
thing,
nos échanges, il
but
n'y a
if
pas
the
de souci,
written
hein.
press
Bon, moi, là, je vous ai dit tout ce que nous
wants
savions au niveau
further
judiciaire.
information, there's no issue. Of course, I've told you everything that we know on a legal,
Après, si vous voulez faire des photos des
on the
gendarmes,
legal side. I really couldn't say anything different. But if you want to take pictures of the gendarme,
voilà.
go ahead.
Ah. À toi, les points. Ah. Donc, alors, vous voulez qu'on fasse quoi? Ah, d'accord.
So what do you want us to do?
Je vous remercie.
Merci à tous.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
évoquer les grands